Hi, Cedarlands. Happy Monday. I hope you had a chance to enjoy this beautiful weather that we had. I'm going to read some Harry Potter to you, but I also wanted to let you know that in the next coming weeks, I'm probably going to be doing some lessons and sending them out via YouTube, just kind of like these Harry Potter read-alouds, so that maybe you can learn some new material or brush up on some stuff that maybe you were confused about since school's been shut down, but just to engage you a little bit more with going forward. So I will be communicating with families before we do any of that, just so you know it is coming, okay? All right, I'm going to read Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. We are on page, if you're following along, page 188, we'll say. It's been a few days, and so I don't quite remember exactly where we left off, but 188, I know that Harry was recently injured during the Quidditch match, and he spent a few days in Madame Pomfrey's hospital wing in Hogwarts, and now he's currently talking to Professor Lupin about the whole incident. So that is where we left off. Why did they have to come to the match? Remember, Harry's talking about the Dementors. Why did they have to come to the match? Said Harry bitterly. They're getting hungry, said Lupin coolly, shutting his briefcase with a snap. Dumbledore won't let them into the school, so their supply of human prey has dried up. I don't think they could resist the large crowd around the Quidditch field. All that excitement, emotions running high. It was their idea of a feast. Azkaban must be terrible, Harry muttered. Lupin nodded grimly. The fortress is set on a tiny island way out to sea, but they don't need walls and water to keep the prisoners in. Not when they're all trapped inside their own heads, incapable of a single cheerful thought. Most of them go mad within weeks. But Sirius Black escaped from them, Harry said slowly. He got away. Lupin's briefcase slipped from the desk. He had to stop quickly to catch it. Yes, he said, straightening up. Black must have found a way to fight them. I wouldn't have believed it possible. Dementors are supposed to drain a wizard of his powers if he is left with them for too long. You made that Dementor on the track back off, said Harry suddenly. There are certain defenses one can use, said Lupin, but there was only one Dementor on the train. The more there are, the more difficult it becomes to resist. What defenses? Said Harry at once. Can you teach me? I don't pretend to be an expert at fighting Dementors, Harry. Quite contrary. I'm sorry, I messed that up. I don't pretend to be an expert at fighting Dementors, Harry. Quite the contrary. But if the Dementors come to another Quidditch match, I need to be able to fight them. Lupin looked into Harry's determined face, hesitated, then said, Well, all right, I'll try and help, but it'll have to wait until next term, I'm afraid. I have a lot to do before the holidays. I chose a very inconvenient time to fall ill. What with the promise of the anti-Dementor lessons from Lupin, the thought that he might never have to hear his mother's death again, and the fact that Ravenclaw flattened Hufflepuff in their Quidditch match at the end of November, Harry's mood took a definite upturn. Gryffindor were not out of the running after all, although they could not afford to lose another match. Wood became repossessed of his mania. I don't know why I can't read today. Wood became repossessed of his maniac energy and worked his team as hard as ever in the chilly haze of rain that persisted into December. Harry saw no hint of Dementor within the grounds. Dumbledore's anchors seemed to be keeping them at their stations at the entrances. 2 weeks before the end of term, the sky lightened suddenly into a dazzling, opaline white, and the muddy grounds were revealed one morning covered in glittering frost. Inside the castle, there was a buzz of Christmas in the air. Professor Flitwick, the charms teacher, had already decorated his classroom with shimmering lights that turned out to be real fluttering fairies. The students were all happily discussing their plans for the holidays. Both Ron and Hermione had decided to remain at Hogwarts, and though Ron said it was because he couldn't stand 2 weeks with Percy, and Hermione insisted she needed to use the library, Harry wasn't fooled. They were doing it to keep him company, and he was very grateful. To everyone's delight, except Harry's, there was to be another Hogsmeade trip the very last weekend of the term. "We can do all our Christmas shopping there," said Hermione. "Mum and Dad would really love those tooth-flossing string mints from Honeydukes." Resigned to the fact that he would be the only third year staying behind, Harry borrowed a copy of Witch Broomstick from Wood and decided to spend the day reading up on the different makes. He had been riding one of the school brooms at team practice, an ancient shooting star, which was very slow and jerky. He definitely needed a new broom of his own. On the Saturday morning of the Hogsmeade trip, Harry bid goodbye to Ron and Hermione, who were wrapped in cloaks and scarves. Then he turned up the marble staircase alone and headed back toward Gryffindor Tower. Snow had started to fall outside the windows, and the castle was still and quiet. "Psst! Harry!" He turned halfway along the third-floor corridor to see Fred and George peering out at him from behind a statue of a humpbacked, one-eyed witch. "What are you doing?" said Harry curiously. "How come you're not going to Hogsmeade?" "We've come to give you a bit of festive cheer before we go," said Fred with a mysterious wink. "Come in here." He nodded toward an empty classroom to the left of the one-eyed statue. Harry followed Fred and George inside. George closed the door quietly and then turned, beaming to look at Harry. "Early Christmas present for you, Harry," he said. Fred pulled something from inside his cloak with a flourish and laid it on one of the desks. It was a large, square, very worn piece of parchment with nothing written on it. Harry, suspecting one of Fred and George's jokes, stared at it. "What's it supposed to be?" "This, Harry, is the secret of our success," said George, patting the parchment fondly. "It's arranged giving it to you," said Fred, "but we decided last night your need's greater than ours." "Anyway, we know it by heart," said George. "We bequeath it to you. We don't really need it anymore." "And what do I need with the old bit of parchment?" said Harry. "A bit of old parchment?" said Fred, closing his eyes with a grimace as though Harry had mortally offended him. "Explain, George." "Well, when we were in our first year, Harry, young, carefree, and innocent," Harry snorted. He doubted whether Fred and George had ever been innocent. Well, more innocent than we are now. We got into a spot of bother with Filch. We let off a dung bomb in the corridor, and it upset him for some reason. So he hauled us off to his office and started threatening us with the usual. Detention, disembowelment, and we couldn't help noticing a drawer in one of his filing cabinets marked "Confiscated and highly dangerous." "Don't tell me," said Harry, starting to grin. "Well, what would you have done?" said Fred. "George caused diversion by dropping another dung bomb. I whipped the drawer open and grabbed this." It's not as bad as it sounds, you know, said George. We don't reckon Filch ever found out how it worked. He probably suspected what it was, though, or he wouldn't have confiscated it. You're winding me up, said Harry, looking at the ragged old bit of parchment. Oh, are we? Said George. He took out his wand, touched the parchment lightly, and said, I solemnly swear that I am up to no good. And at once, thin ink lines began to spread like a spider's web from the point that George's wand had touched. They joined each other, they crisscrossed, they fanned into every corner of the parchment. Then words began to blossom across the top. Great, curly, green words that proclaimed, Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, purveyors of aids to magical mischief makers, are proud to present the Marauder's Map. It was a map showing every detail of the Hogwarts castle and grounds, but the truly remarkable thing were the tiny ink dots moving around it, each labeled with a name in minuscule writing. Astounded, Harry bent over it. A labeled dot in the top left corner showed that Professor Dumbledore was pacing his study. The caretaker's cat, Mrs. Norris, was prowling the second floor, and Peeves, the poltergeist, was currently bouncing around the trophy room. And as Harry's eyes traveled up and down the familiar corridors, he noticed something else. So we're going to find out tomorrow on our reading what it is that Harry has noticed. All right, have a good night, you guys, and I will read more tomorrow. Bye.